Catholic Church today is suffering from two self-inflicted wounds. The first one I've talked about before, namely the clerical sex abuse scandal. This terrible abuse of the most vulnerable members of the church by some priests and the countenancing of this by some bishops. This is, also I've argued before, the perfect storm. Why? Not only is it a terrible abuse of young people, not only does it cause lifelong pain for many people, it's also undermined the work of the church in almost every way because it cuts at the foundation of the credibility we need in order to teach and to preach and to evangelize. My work in evangelization and teaching has been affected every day by the clerical sex abuse scandal. If you'd asked me 20 years ago what was the worst moment in American Catholic Church history, I would have said the middle of the last century, 19th century, when churches and convents were being burned down and political parties were being organized in an anti-Catholic spirit. But that's not the worst time. Now it's the period we're going through right now is the worst moment in American Catholic Church history. So we're suffering from that still open and self-inflicted wound. The second one is one that I think in the long term might be as damaging to the church's credibility as the sex abuse scandal. I'm talking here about certain moves that were made in the years after Vatican II. Mind you, not because of Vatican II, but after Vatican II. Some leaders in the church's catechesis and teaching and so on said that the primary purpose of the church was to reach out to the modern culture, to accommodate itself to the world. There was an adage in the 1960s, I remember as a little kid even hearing this, that the world sets the agenda for the church. What this led to, of course, was a jettisoning of many of the elements that make Catholicism distinctive, unique. I mean, much of Catholic philosophy, theology, art, poetry, literature, etc. It conduced to what I've called a beige church, a beige Catholicism. Unsure of itself, hand-wringing, one that allowed its distinctive colors to bleed into beige. I often think of this, that the church eagerly went running after modernity in the years after Vatican II, but modernity did not come running into the arms of the church. Modernity kept running away, rather indifferent to its ardent pursuer. Then, after September 11th especially, elements of that modern culture didn't remain simply neutral to Catholicism. Rather, they turned on it with great aggression. So I've spoken often about the new atheism and your Christopher Hitchens and Daniel Dennett's and company, who now say religion is dangerous, it's violent, it's irrational. They've come after us. But see, here's the problem, and here's why I talk about it as a self-inflicted wound. The problem is we dropped our weapons. We dropped the philosophy, theology, literature, and so on that would enable us to defend ourselves against a culture which has turned aggressively against us. Well, this all came to my mind when last week I read about this famous now Pew Forum study. The Pew Forum, analyzes religious attitudes in the country. This most recent survey showed, depressingly, distressingly as far as I'm concerned, that atheists and agnostics know the faith much better than mainstream Protestants and Catholics. They gave a survey to representative groups of people about religion, especially Christianity, but also world religions, asking, I think, 35 or so questions. And as I say, the atheists and agnostics performed best, Catholics and Protestants way back in the pack. Perhaps most distressingly of all, the worst group were Hispanic Catholics. Well, of course, the atheists were not slow to seize on this. What they said was, see, to know religion, as we do, is to hate it. Once you understand this goofy system, you turn against it. And, concomitantly, the condition for the possibility of accepting it is to be rather confused about it. And so this survey, is congruent with a lot of the assumptions of atheists, sadly. Now, this is obviously pretty distressing news for believers, especially for Catholics. And I would say, I know it's complicated. All these things are always complicated, and you can't say there's one cause. But I would say a major contributing factor to this problem is precisely the beige approach I was talking about, this hyper-accommodating approach whereby we dropped a lot of our distinctive elements. I mean, let's face it, if the primary purpose is dialoguing with the culture, why bother learning the distinctiveness of the faith? If the main thing is being a nice person, why would you bother studying our great tradition? Now, there's good news and bad news here, I think. The good news is this trend can be reversed. The bad news is it will be difficult because it involves the learning of this great and noble and rich and beautiful tradition. But as is the case with anything, if you want to recover Shakespeare, it's a lot of work. You want to recover classical Greek philosophy, there's a lot of work. You want to recover modern Einsteinian physics, you got to do a lot of work. The same is true with our great Catholic tradition. I mean, look, the Catholic tradition includes the richly complex texts of the Bible. It includes the systematic theology of St. Irenaeus. It includes the Platonizing theology of Origen and Augustine. It includes those beautifully sinuous arguments of Thomas Aquinas. It includes the mysticism of Teresa of Avila and Bernard and St. John of the Cross. It includes the sermons of John Henry Newman. It includes the life-changing poetry of Dante. It includes the music of Palestrina and Mozart. It includes the theology of Hans Urs von Balthasar, the theology of the body of John Paul II. All of that is this great Catholic tradition. It's a way of thinking. It's a whole way of being in the world. And see, we have to recover this so that we have, for want of a better term, weapons when the culture turns aggressively against us, or we have weapons when we want to go out to meet the culture and really have something to say to it. We need, I think, a whole new army of sisters and priests and brothers and teachers and catechists who know and love this tradition I've been describing, who know it from the inside and are passionate to communicate it. We need them as a new fighting force, if you want, in the world. That atheists and agnostics know our faith better than we do is, quite frankly, pathetic. But it should also be, for all of us in the church, a call to arms.